Today we're going to talk about evaluating algebraic expressions. All of this really is taking order of operations to the next level, because instead of being given just all of our numbers, we now have to look at some variables in a problem and then substitute numbers for those variables. Okay? So literally that's all we're doing. You have to think about a couple of things though as we're doing this. Expressions, first of all, they have no equal signs. It's just a number sentence, so to speak, with no equal sign at the end. So you're taking some very large sentence and you're making it down into one number or maybe a number and a variable. Algebraic, right here, we're talking about algebraic means that we have variables that we need to substitute numbers for. So they're going to give you X, Y, and Z, and you will substitute in whatever numbers they tell you X, Y, and Z are. Then this is the easy part. Once we substitute our numbers, we're going to solve according to our order of operations. So that's nothing different than what we've been doing for the past couple days. So here's our first problem. If A is equal to 1, B is equal to 2, and C is equal to -3, evaluate. Evaluate just means to get it out of this long sentence and get it into something more manageable, like one number, hopefully. Now, there's a couple things couple tips I'm going to give you as we go. One of the things is you'll notice that we've written these out and they're horizontal. When I see it horizontal like this, a lot of times in my eyes, I don't see it correctly. I need to see it more in a list, because when I see something like this right next to each other, it kind of makes me think that B is going to be 1. And that's just the way I look at it. Again, the way my brain works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to list this out. Well, I know that A is equal to 1. B is equal to 2, and C is equal to -3. There's two reasons why I do this. For one, I can see it better. In my own eyes, I can see it better. The second thing is, it makes me really look and see what numbers I have to substitute. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it a single digit? Is it a double digit? Really makes me evaluate what I'm doing there. And again, hence our word evaluate. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and plug in my numbers for each thing. A, right here, A is going to become 1. That's easy enough. I'm going to add to it B. Well, B is 2, but it tells me I need to have the 2 to the second power, 2 squared. I'm going to add to that 2C. Well, 2C, remember when we have a number and a letter right smack dab next to each other, we have to remember that we are multiplying those two things together. So that means I'm going to need to have a symbol here. I'm going to use my parentheses for my letter C. And that means that I'm going to do 2 times whatever's inside there. C, we can see, is -3. All right, now this part should be pretty easy because we're right back to our regular order of operations. So what I'm going to do first is, again, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally's last remark. If you want to write it up here, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Remember, last remark means we're going left to right as we do multiplying and dividing at the same time, as we see it going left to right, and then again adding and subtracting going left to right. Okay, so I have parentheses, but really these parentheses here, this means I'm multiplying. So that's not really a parentheses. So I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to cross this off actually. I'm going to go to the next one, which is my exponents. Right here is what I need to do next. So that means I have 1 plus 4, because 2 times 2, 2 times itself, remember, is 4, plus 2, parentheses, -3. Okay, well now we're going to do, we did our exponents. Now we're going to do the multiplication and division at the same time, going from left to right. Well, the first thing I have is 1 plus 4. Then I have 4 plus 2, so I don't have anything yet. Now I have 2 times 3. That's what I'm going to do right here first. 1 plus 4 plus a -6, because again, 2 times 3 is 6, but we have a +2 and a -3. So that gives me -6. All right, so we've done our multiplying and dividing. Now we're just going to add and subtract. Okay, well that's easy enough. I have 1 plus 4. I'm going to go left to right. That's going to be 5. And I'm going to add to that a -6. I probably should have kept it in the parentheses here just because of the fact of that negative sign. Remember what we talked about before with adding negative numbers or combining integers? One of the things we said is we want to eliminate double signs. So right now I'm looking at this right here, and I don't like that. I don't want to have double signs next to each other. So different signs, remember it's going to be then 5, oops, something's happened. There we go. 5 minus 6, because our different signs become negative. And now we can combine our integers. 5 minus 6, you might already know it's going to be negative 1. Or excuse me, negative 1. But you might want to go ahead and say that's a positive 5. And this is a negative 6. Different signs, I find the difference between the numbers, or subtract them. So then that's going to give me a 1, and I take the sign of the larger number. Remember, our little larger means absolute value. Negative 6 has a greater absolute value than positive 5. So my answer is negative 1. And there's our first question. Let's do another one. Same kind of thing here. We're just going to substitute in. We say A is negative 3 and B is 5. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's just go ahead and plug in what we need to plug in. We have 5 parentheses, because again, 5A right here, that means 5 times whatever A is. In this case, A is negative 3. I'm going to add to that B squared. Well, B is 5, but again, it's squared that we're talking about. So I'm going to follow my order of operations, which means I need to do my exponents first right here. And that means all this is the same. 5 minus 3 plus 5 squared is 25, because 5 times 5 is 25. Now I'm going to do the multiplication. Again, the reason why we left our parentheses around that is to remind us that we're doing multiplication. If you prefer to write the multiplication sign 5 times negative 3, if you wanted to do something like this, that's fine. You can do that. Or if you would rather do this with a regular multiplication sign, that's fine. However you want to write it is fine, as long as you're showing that that is multiplication back here. Again, with 5A, that meant 5 times A. So we have 3 times negative 5. We have negative 15. Because again, a negative times a positive is a negative. And we're going to add to that 25. Again, think about our integers. These are different signs. I'm going to circle my integers. A negative 15, a positive 25. So different signs, I find the difference, or I subtract. So I get 10. And which sign will it be? It's going to be positive, because 25 has a greater absolute value than negative 15. All right, next one. We're starting to get a little bit trickier here. Don't freak out when you see something like this. It's, yes, a little bit harder, but it's not something that's impossible. You can still do this, okay? So we're just going to do the same thing of plugging in the numbers that we need to plug in. So x is negative 2. So I have negative 2 over y, which was 4. And all that's in parentheses, because all that's being raised to the second power. I'm going to add to that 3. So the 3 doesn't change. It's still 3. Sometimes they'll throw numbers in there for you. And we're going to subtract x. Well, x is negative 2. So I want to put it in my parentheses again. So I remember that's a negative. And I'm going to add to it y, which is 4. Okay, so already it's looking better because I don't have all the variables in there. All right, we're going to work on our order of operations, which means I'm going to do what's inside the parentheses first. Negative 2 over 4. I need to simplify that. I need to make it easier to look at. So all this is going to become is negative 1 over 2. Again, make it easier on yourself. And that's going to be squared plus 3 minus parentheses negative 2 plus 4. Okay, so nothing major happened here. We didn't do anything too hard. But I still need to now I need to do my exponents here. Okay, so I've got to think about this. Negative half squared. Well, what does that mean? It means I'm going to take negative half and I'm going to times it by negative half. Because remember, we're taking that base number and timesing it by itself 2 times. So there it is, 2 times. So I need to do the math here. We know a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, that's good. And multiplying fractions we know is pretty easy. It's going to be 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 2 is 4. So that just simplifies down to that. So let's go ahead and plug this in here. That means I have 1/4 plus, and all the rest of this, 3 minus -2 plus 4. See, already it's starting to look a little bit better. Okay, now we need to make sure that we are following our order of operations. So all I have left here is adding and subtracting. Well, that's easy enough. I'm going to go left to right. So I'm going to underline this. 1/4 plus 3 is 3 1/4, right? And I'm subtracting everything else. Well, I'm doing the rest of this. Minus -2 plus 4. Okay, now I need to do this part right here. Remember, we already talked about this. We don't like double signs. So let's get rid of these double signs here. And 2 negatives right here means it's going to become a positive. That means I'm going to add. So again, makes my life a little easier. Adding is a little bit easier than subtracting. So I have 3 1/4 plus 2. That gives me 5 1/4 plus 4. And all I have to do now is add this up. And I get 9 1/4. And I'm all done. If you wanted, you could make that 0.25. Or back in the beginning, you could have actually done the division. When we look back up here, I could have done the division right here to say -2 divided by 4. And I would have come out with -0.5 for my answer down here. Either way, it still gives us the same answer. So if you have a decimal final answer of 9.25, that's okay. That works too. All right, one more. Again, just trying to mix it up on you, make it just a little bit harder. We're going to plug in our numbers, see what we get. I have 4. 4 is going to stay 4. D is 1/2. Again, this is 4 times D, so it's 4 times 1/2. Plus, E is -4. I'm going to put the -4 in parentheses, again, because of the fact that it's negative, and it's raised to the second power. And I'm subtracting this right here. What do those bars mean again? If you answered absolute value, you are correct. Remember that we're talking about the absolute value of -12. Okay, so now we have to follow our order of operations again. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. All right? Well, parentheses, remember we said are any kind of grouping symbol. Well, I have the grouping symbol right here of my absolute value bars. These here are a grouping symbol. So I'm going to do that part right here first. So everything else is just getting rewritten. I have 4 parentheses half plus -4 raised to the second power, or -4 squared, minus, now, absolute value of -12. That's 12. So hopefully you put 12 here. Okay, here we go. We're now going to still follow order of operations. We did parentheses or grouping symbols. Now I have to do exponents. I do have an exponent. It's right here. Again, let's remember what we're doing here with that exponent. We're doing -4 times -4. So it's a negative times a negative, which gives me a positive. So I have 4 parentheses 1/2 plus 16, because it was a positive 16. 4 times 4 is 16 minus 12. All right, so I did my exponents. Now I'm doing multiply and divide from left to right. Well, all I have is a multiplication here, and that's this one right here. So 4 times 1/2. There's an easy way to think of this. One of the things you want to think of when you think of multiplication is the word of. And I can flip this around because of commutative property, but I can say this. 1/2 times 4, which is the same as saying 1/2 of 4. Sometimes it's a little easier to think of it as of, 1/2 of 4. We know that 1/2 of 4 is 2. Well, there's my answer. So it's 2 plus 16 minus 12. Now I'm just following my order of operations left to right because it's only adding and subtracting. This is 18 minus 12, which gives my final answer as 6.